All right, I'd like to call this meeting to order. Welcome to the May 28th, 2025 regular meeting of the Traffic and Transportation Advisory Commission. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Please put your right hand over your heart. Ready, begin. Pledge allegiance to the flag. One nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. All right, now we'll do the roll call. Mrs. Vasquez, please call the roll.
Chair Callahan,
Present.
Vice Chair Emil,
Present.
Commissioner Guerra,
Here.
Commissioner Selm,
Present.
Commissioner Weichel.
Present.
All right, now we'll move on to public comments. Mrs. Vasquez, please make the public comments announcement.
This is the time and place for public comments. Registration for public comments is available for those wishing to address the Traffic Commission regarding items on the agenda or on a subject within the city's jurisdiction. Speakers for specific agenda items shall be called and heard during that specific item. All remarks should be addressed to the Traffic Commission as a whole. Speakers are requested to state their name and community of residence for the record. Under state law, public comment matters may not be considered by the Traffic Commission unless listed on the agenda, but may be referred to the city engineer for administrative follow-up. No individuals have requested to speak, and no written comments have been submitted. Also, please silence all cell phones during the meeting, and please remember to mute your microphones when you are not speaking.
All right, seeing there are no speakers, Mrs. Vasquez, are we able to move on to summary notes? Okay. So next section, are there any comments on the summary notes? This is for our commissioners. Do we have any questions? Yes, Commissioner Selm.
Yes, I have a question. We're talking about the minutes. Yeah. I'm just curious of staff. going back to the minutes from the last meeting, like, for example, 9A, just overall comments and questions from the commissioners themselves aren't really captured in the summary notes. And, you know, I know that you have to be judicious with like how much you're actually capturing, but I'm just curious what the feedback to council is if it's not in the minutes. So can you maybe like give us a little more information on like what you're capturing, when and then how that kind of information is translated to city council? Thank you.
Yeah, sure. I think again, good evening, Commissioner Selm and Nader Hidari, Public Works Director. I think the item that gets captured or gets focused on maybe is, and the way these are currently structured, is for the public comments. But typically the feedback from the commissioners gets incorporated into the project design, which then eventually makes its way to City Council, and then the City Council report at that point will give an indication of if certain changes were made or recommended by the Traffic Commission. But I think we could expand a little bit more on that in the minutes for the actual reports themselves to encapsulate what the commissioners' feedback had been provided. We'll do that.
Okay, thank you for that. I appreciate it.
All right, thank you. Are there any additional comments? All right, seeing there are none, we'll move on to the next section, which is the engineer's reports. And before we hear the engineer's report in item 6A, I would like to clarify the Traffic Commission's role for this item. The city's 2023 crossing guard policy is based on objective standards directly related to pedestrian and vehicle counts. Per the policy, this report before us tonight is an annual information item only and is being provided to the Transportation Commission to provide transparency and facilitate public input. As such, no vote or recommendation or motion by the Commission is required. The formal listed action is to receive the report. With that being said, may we please request Emergency Program Administrator Graham Watts to present our first report, which is an information item.
Very good. Thank you, and good evening. Commissioners, my name is Graham Watts. I'm the Program Administrator, and I'm here today with Nader Hidari, Public Works Director, and Senior Traffic Engineer Jim Michiko. This item before you is our annual informational report to the Traffic Commission on pedestrian and vehicle counts at all staffed school crossings throughout the city. Just to give you some background, the City Council approved the first crossing guard in 1964, shortly after the city's incorporation, and has been managing that program and funding it ever since. The state has established a minimum crossing guard standard that is used by most school districts and cities that are needed to meet, that are met for considering crossing guard placement in various locations. Since 1999, a citywide standard modeled after the state guidelines, but with more generous qualifying thresholds, has guided the placement of guards in Thousand Oaks. The program has been adaptable over the years, with locations either added or removed based on the needs of the program and changes in traffic patterns. It's important to note that meeting minimum standards alone does not require the placement of a crossing guard, but rather qualifies a location for consideration. As you can see, crossing guards are spread citywide at 24 intersections, 20 of which are at Conejo School District elementary and middle school campuses, 15 elementary, 5 middle schools, and another at Sycamore Canyon, which is a K-8 school. 18 sites are adjacent to a school, while 6 are down the street. Most schools have one crossing guard location, but some schools do have more than one crossing guard. In 2022, City Council directed staff to work with the Traffic Commission to update the city's crossing guard policies and standards. Based on the Traffic Commission's detailed input and feedback, as well as considerable public input throughout the whole process, the City Council adopted the policy in February 2023. This policy, which took effect during the 23-24 school year, features clear and objective standards for crossing guard placement that are more generous than the state standards used by most public agencies. This is primarily through relaxed minimum thresholds of the number of vehicles and pedestrians needed to qualify, which are in many cases half of what state standards normally require to qualify for a crossing guard. Objective standards in this policy exist to ensure resources are deployed appropriately and that decisions are applied fairly and without bias. The process for conducting the annual counts is listed on this slide and begins with annual field counts and all school-age pedestrians and vehicles at all locations, performed by a professional engineering firm every spring. The results of each annual count are compared against the city's policy standards by the Public Works Director to determine if the location meets the minimum standards to qualify for a crossing guard. Staff then brings the report as an information item to the Traffic Commission as a venue to share the information and collect public input. The City Council approved policy has a minimum amount of school-aged pedestrians and vehicle movements that conflict with the movement of pedestrians through the crosswalk for each of the 3 different types of intersections to be eligible. These requirements are generally half of what state standards normally require to qualify for a crossing guard. To qualify for a crossing guard, a location must meet both the pedestrian and vehicle minimum counts in both the AM and PM, and any pedestrian count of less than 10 for either the AM or PM automatically disqualifies a location. As mentioned previously, most of these values are less than the state standards, which makes them far easier to qualify for. As an example, the state requires 40 pedestrians at uncontrolled or stop-controlled intersections, yet the city only requires 20. The annual pedestrian and vehicle counts are completed in coordination with published school bell schedules during blue skies, with no special events, in an effort to maximize pedestrian and vehicle numbers. The counts are completed during a 60-minute window in the morning and again in the afternoon, and mostly on Tuesdays through Thursdays, avoiding Mondays and Fridays, rainy days, and major holidays. The approved policy includes 4 additional criteria that can also be considered to qualify a location. Each of these alternatives were designed and inserted into the policy to lower minimum thresholds if certain criteria are met. This year, several additional locations were qualified, a direct result of the more generous provisions of the city policy, including the one noted under alternative number 1. Thousand Oaks has the largest number of crosswalk locations staffed with crossing guards in Ventura County, even more than Simi Valley and Oxnard, which are larger in population. The other comparable city to Thousand Oaks in size is Ventura, which only funds the 5 intersections that meet the state standards, with the Ventura School District responsible for locations that don't meet the state standards. It's important to note that many school districts in Southern California and Ventura County are directly involved in the oversight of their school crossing guard program. The majority of agencies use state standards. However, the City of Thousand Oaks is the only agency in Ventura County that uses its own more generous local standards instead of relying on the state standards for placing crossing guards at intersections. I just would like to highlight just a couple key points of city efforts to improve local walkability and pedestrian safety citywide. Since 2010, the city has funded over $25 million to make local streets safer with sidewalks and bike lanes that are more accessible and easy to use, including near schools. Examples include bike lanes on Herbs Road, Willow Lane, and Moore Park Road, repurposed busy arterial streets like Avenida de las Arblas, Hillcrest Drive, and Reno Road, enhanced, in fact, 36 enhanced pedestrian crossings, with about 10 of those being added last year, the addition of sidewalks to roadways such as Jan's Road, Los Feliz Drive and Rancho Road, which improves the walkability to schools, including the upgrading of hundreds of curb ramps for improved ADA access. We've also constructed bulb outs to shorten pedestrian crossing distances that extend sidewalk partially into the street, such as Willow Lane and Thousand Oaks Boulevard, and previously near Redwood Middle School. The city also has an approved comprehensive citywide active transportation plan that we are in the process of updating that notes future bicycle and pedestrian improvements. The city continues to its rehabilitation and repair of sidewalks year-round and has been successful in securing millions of dollars in state and federal funds. Lastly, the city has and continues to invest in modernizing roadway lighting, starting with planned lighting upgrades on Avenida de los Arboles and Los Feliz Drive. In addition to building and improving physical infrastructure in Thousand Oaks, the city has put extensive effort into creating education and awareness that promotes walking to school in combination with the city's school crossing guard program and crosswalk counts over the past 12 years. The comprehensive walktoschool.org website was built in 2023 and has been frequently updated since when it was customized with materials, allowing people to use and organize walking events digitally and in print. The website supports the various in-person outreach presentations and materials that we utilize to promote the program for walking and biking. There's also been extensive digital reach to over 12,000 impressions in terms of its social media reach and website impact. Far more details are noted in your packet for your review. As mentioned earlier, the approved policy contains clear and objective criteria that is used to determine whether or not each location is eligible for placement of crossing guards. The new policy also contains two consecutive review processes, which means that a location is not eliminated based on just one count, but actually 2 years in a row. This allows the crossing guard program to continue to be able to adapt to the needs of the public and expand or contract as needed to match traffic patterns. The annual field counts of all school-age pedestrians and vehicles at all locations that are performed by the independent professional engineering firm is important. The results of each annual count are compared against the city's policy standards to determine if the location meets the minimum standards to qualify for a crossing guard. Staff then brings the report as an information item to the Traffic Commission as a venue to share the information and collect input. Based on the final information, changes are then implemented ahead of the following year to add locations that now meet the standards or discontinue those that have not met the standards for 2 years in a row. This year's counts were completed and verified on May 6, 2025. As noted earlier, this year's counts are year number 2 under this policy. 11 of the 24 locations do not meet the city's easier to meet standards. Fewer than 18 of those would not meet the city if we use the state standard, most of any, as done by other agencies. 10 of these 11 locations have not met the requirements for at least 2 years in a row. Therefore, there are 10 existing crossing guard locations that do not qualify for a crossing guard for at least 2 years in a row, 7 of which have not met the requirements for 4 years in a row. This means that the city currently has control measures at locations that do not meet the policy. Staff has updated the City Council on the crossing guard program as done on May 20th and included the results of the annual counts. Council has also authorized staff to engage with the school district on options for future program oversight, including possible transfer of the entire program to the school district. The existing council policy will continue to govern the program and qualification of intersections unless global changes to the program or the oversight of the program are implemented. Here are the details of and results of the 2025 counts for each location. This is the list of the 13 existing locations that do have sufficient pedestrian and vehicle counts to meet the city's minimum standards for crossing guards. It should be noted that only 6 of these 13 locations would qualify for a crossing guard if the city used the state standard, which most other agencies use, which means 7 additional locations have qualified due to the city's generous and easier to meet requirements. This shows that the city's policy is being effective and helping more locations. And here's a breakdown of the 11 existing sites that do not meet the minimum criteria or qualify under any of the 4 alternative application of the policy. These results are similar to past counts, including 2024, where 13 locations did not meet the criteria. 7 of these locations have not met the minimum standards for 4 years in a row. 5 of the 11 locations did not qualify due to extremely low pedestrian counts, with single-digit pedestrians being counted. All of these locations, other than Caneo Elementary, have not met the standards for at least 2 years in a row. Some closing notes for you to consider. The city's crossing guard policy is the most generous and accommodating of any city in the county. Despite extensive outreach and promoting walking to school, the results from this year's counts are similar to recent years. Many locations have extremely low usage. The new city policy has been effective. It has helped 7 additional locations qualify, more than double the 6 that met the normal state standards. The counts from this year are the second year of the 2-year rule, and therefore the 10 intersections that have very low counts for 2 consecutive years are scheduled to be discontinued ahead of the upcoming school year. The city will continue to promote walking to school via our robust public outreach campaign, including the comprehensive walktoschool.org website that contains all the walk and bike safety tips and grassroots tools to enable residents to mobilize their neighborhoods. The city will continue to make key infrastructure and engineering improvements to streets and intersections citywide, including exploring opportunities to build more enhanced pedestrian crossings and sidewalks and install more bike lanes citywide. Lastly, the program has expanded and contracted since its inception, and locations will continue to be added or removed in the public based on the field's actual counts to match the actual needs of the public and changes in transit, or I should say traffic patterns. In closing, a reminder that the City Crossing Guard program is adaptable and that locations in the future will continue to be added or removed on the field's actual counts to match the actual needs of the public and changes in traffic patterns. The city's crossing guard policy is the most generous and accommodating of any city in the county. The Traffic Commission's authority on this item, given that it's informational only as opposed to an action item, is just to receive the report, which you have done, and to take public comment for the record. I thank you for your time and be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for the presentation, Mr. Watts. Does the commission have any questions for staff? Yes, Commissioner Aguera.
Thank you so much. Very concise, and I was able to listen to the report as it was presented to City Council recently. So I have kind of an overview of and a couple of questions, but for both staff and it might be for yourself as well. So in the report, it says possible transfer to CVUSD. So what parameters are you looking at to determine when a possible transfer would occur? And then who's involved specifically through CVUSD in this discussion?
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Aguera. I can attempt to answer that one. That was the direction that City Council ultimately provided to staff last week at the end of the May 20th City Council meeting. And so they did not establish any limits or parameters necessarily. It was more to initiate discussions with CVUSD and see if there is an alternative mechanism to manage or oversee the crossing guard program, and the individuals involved would be through the city manager's office and through the superintendent of schools over at the Caneo Valley Unified School District. That's those discussions have already initiated and are ongoing.
So I have a few more questions. Is that okay?
Yes.
Okay. So you mentioned discontinuing, and I think it was in my notes, it's figure 10, Avenida de los Árboles and Avenida de las Plantas. So that would be to Ladera Stars. And I just have a concern about that particular intersection, just because there is there's just a stop sign there, and that is an intersection where there's heavy traffic going down Arboles in both directions, as well as a strip mall, which really is kind of a unique feature for a crossing. And so I don't know if staff or look at just where the crossing guard is and whether or not that would necessitate maybe looking at the neighborhood placement of that, not just the fact that there are not enough, children crossing, but the impending liability when you have a gas station, a strip mall, heavy traffic down Arboles. So I'm just wondering the decision on that.
Yes, that location, I have a couple notes on that one. That particular location, as with all of them, went through the alternative analysis. The policy that the Traffic Commission and the City Council developed with staff in 2023 includes some special accommodations if the roadway has a certain speed limit, certain number of volume of traffic, certain width, and to allow those locations to more easily meet and qualify. But however, even without that even lower bar, so that this, because it's that nature of the street, has an even easier to qualify threshold for crossing guards. However, even with those lower limits, it still wasn't able to achieve that qualification. This intersection does have an always stop. There are many other locations that are in the mix that don't even have the stop sign. So that is a positive feature, that location does have an always stop. Staff is also evaluating a potential future traffic signal at that location. That intersection has ranked number 1 in our traffic signal ranking prioritization. I think 1 or 2 cycles in a row. That item is scheduled, that update that we do periodically every couple of years is scheduled to come before the Traffic Commission later this year to evaluate the rankings and the criteria for the remaining intersections in town and which ones should qualify to have a traffic signal. So that would be an additional enhancement at that intersection if it were to.
Because even though it doesn't meet the criteria, there are still children that are crossing, and that's in my neighborhood. I'm sure everybody that lives in Thousand Oaks is familiar with that strip mall. And so I'm just concerned about how taking away a crossing guard from such a busy intersection, how that would impact the safety issue. But, and I think it is unique in the sense that there's a gas station, as I said before, a strip mall. Further down the road, there's a Trader Joe's, you know what I'm saying? So that kind of popped out at me. And I'll ask one more question. I have a few more, but I don't want to take up everybody else's time. So you mentioned that there is and I don't know what the acronym, RRFB warning system. So how is it determined if a crosswalk qualifies for that?
I'd like to see if our, I can answer the first part, and for the second part, I'd like to see if our senior traffic engineer, Jim Machiko, can help bail me out on that one. But the first part is it's a rectangular rapid flashing beacon, so it's kind of the newer technology for, crossings and notification on roadways. So, but for more information, we will pass it over to Mr. Machiko to help clarify the qualification criteria.
Okay, yes. In terms of crosswalks that have the enhanced feature of the rectangular rapid flashing beacon, right now what we're doing is looking to provide those rectangular rapid flashing beacon warning system at locations that are currently marked with a marked crosswalk that are uncontrolled. For example, I think it was about a year ago or so, we had a project, we had received a grant through the state to upgrade 10 marked crosswalks, and I believe that was identified through our local road safety plan plan that we have. And based on that evaluation, we identified 10 locations in the city that have marked crosswalks that would benefit from having rectangular rapid flashing beacons. And we're probably going to follow that same cycle in the future because we still have quite a bit of marked intersections that are uncontrolled that we would like to add these rectangular rapid flashing beacons. The issue right now is that we just don't have that funding mechanism to provide those lights. I mean, it's one of the most popularly requested features that the public asks for, and we'd like to add more, but we're looking for any grant opportunities available to upgrade our crosswalks.
Jim, what's the approximate cost for one of those mechanisms per crosswalk?
I would say about in terms of material costs, it's probably neighborhood about $30,000 to $40,000
An installation?
for installation, and then there's most of the locations probably don't need too many other upgrades other than maybe additional pavement markings and additional signs. So ballpark maybe about $50,000 or so per location.
And one more question?
Sure.
So there were 11 schools that didn't qualify. How have they been notified, and or are they in the process of being notified?
Yes, the notifications, most of our formal notifications aren't with the individual school sites or principals. We go through the administration structure of the Caneo Valley Unified School District. So we have notified the appropriate parties at the administration office of the CVUSD, and I would imagine they've notified those schools.
Thank you so much. I have more, but I don't want to take up any more time. I'll yield my time.
Who'd like to go next? Commissioner Weichel?
I loved all your questions. I thought they were great. First off, I want to applaud the city for lowering the threshold. I think that's important, and it syncs with your mission to make the city more walkable and bike friendly. I noticed in Figure 7, the Earth's example, there's signage out in the middle of the crosswalk. Is that like standardized? Because I see some with it, some without it. Obviously, it's probably adjacent to the school. I see that at Kalina as well. I mean, safety is such an issue when young pedestrians or children and kids are at risk. Is there anything that we could do to maybe increase that or standardize that?
You're referring to the barricade signs or other type of kind of warning signs for drivers to alert them that there's a school crossing coming up. Yeah, we are certainly all the signage has been upgraded to like the super high, retroreflective, neon yellow and so forth. And I think maybe Graham can speak to some of the other pieces that in terms of the barricade signs that are put up.
Yeah, it's part of what the Guard does at key locations is to enhance it with sandwich signs or as they walk through there. But they're also, obviously, they have a flagging capability, and they're lit up as much as they can. And they work with the schools with their assistance in some of those situations to help pay more attention to when to cross, how to cross, and to increase visibility wherever possible. But those sandwich signs we refer to are used by the Guard before their shift starts, and then they take it away at the end.
So any intersection or roadway, crossway that doesn't qualify won't get those signs anymore?
I don't know if that's necessarily true. It may come down to coordination with the school district, and some of the schools are very active, obviously, with a volume of pedestrians coming and going, and they know their crossing guards, but they also know their own teachers and staff, and I think there are some capabilities there that might be available should we not have a guard there.
Thank you.
Commissioner Selm?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation, and I do appreciate objective standards in so much as we have to make sure that we are not, playing favorites and things like that. I understand the need. So thank you for that, and for also, I recognize that we have more than other cities in the county, so I appreciate that as well. I do have a few questions just for my own understanding, because I'm a bit of a nerd about these things. So I'm confused by what actual vehicle conflict means. And I heard you describe it as vehicle movements that conflict with pedestrian movement. But since this is an objective standard, it seems like that needs to be really clearly defined for us to be able to understand how you're measuring this. And so can you describe that for me, and then also maybe talk about having that terminology in the crossing guard program standards so that people going forward can understand what that means?
Yeah, I can attempt to answer that one, and Mr. Mashiko can advise if I fill in the gaps. But generally, it's the if there's, for instance, a crossing, a crosswalk at the campus, then only the vehicles passing through that crosswalk are counted, because that's the only vehicles that would be in conflict with the pedestrian. So if a vehicle is turning right on the other, kitty corner from the school, but never is crossing or in conflict with any potential pedestrians, and that's not considered a in that calculation. Basically, it's the conflicting movements where actually with the pedestrians crossing, and if the vehicle's crossing in that same side of the intersection.
So, essentially it's just vehicle counts going through the crosswalk. You could
Yes.
think of it that way.
Yes.
Okay, excellent.
Yes,
Thank you for that.
Correct. Yeah.
May I ask more questions? Thank you. So I have a question about the policy, the program standards. So for one, it says you can request to add a crossing guard location in writing evaluated by Public Works Director to approve or deny. Does that mean that one of these locations that is being determined to be removed this year could be petitioned for return the following year, and then city staff or a consultant would have to go out and do those counts again? Could that happen that way, that return interval like that?
Yeah, certainly. We don't get too many additional locations to be counted, but we do get a couple a year, and it wouldn't be inconceivable to consider that we may get many more next year if indeed 10 locations are removed. All 10 could request to be recounted.
Okay, that's helpful to know. I'm just curious about better understanding the Safe Routes to School funding. I know funding is a tough and sore spot to talk about right now, but what's the current landscape like? Because I think that there's some interesting options to explore doing more work like that on behavior change, and partnering with Bike Ventura County and CVUSD to do more bike to school type of programs. There's some really cool models in Europe that have been shown to really work on behavior change that would be so awesome to model here. And we have great partners that like to do this kind of stuff. So I'm curious if you could share with us a little bit about what the funding landscape looks like and what Safe Routes to School work we are currently doing, or what's up with that? And can we do more work like that?
Yeah, there's a variety of transportation-related grants that we're involved in. Some are congestion mitigation, CMAQ, some are active transportation, ATP-related. Those are the ones we've been gearing more towards recently, and we've been kind of focusing more on the infrastructure ones, because we are doing a local road safety plan every 5 years and are updating our ATP every 5 years, and those are kind of setting the foundation for what projects we should be pursuing. The Safe Routes to Schools, I think we did a a large push in that realm 5 or 10 years ago, and I don't know if there's another cycle of that, or maybe Jim can speak to that. I don't know if we seem to have concluded that effort, but we can certainly see if that's an ongoing program that we can continue to follow up on.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Any additional questions? Commissioner Guerrero?
Sorry. So in your discussion with CVUSD, when you talk about, because apparently there's 13 schools that are left, are you talking about if there is a possible transfer, are you transferring the 13 or are you looking at the complete 24? What would the discussion look like?
Yeah, well, it's just a first clarification. It would be 14 still, because although 13 met the counts, so one of the 11 that didn't meet the counts, it was only their first year of that happening. So
Okay,
they're
thank
not they're still in the program. And that's Conejo Elementary, and they've in many years they've satisfied the counts. So it would be very possible that they would continue to meet next year. So we would be looking at 14. What the spectrum of options are and what the discussions, I guess that in terms of number of locations, it depends on what the participation level is, or how CVUSD is coordinates on that item. It could be either one. I think the discussion at City Council was if the school district is open and there's some process there, because of the benefits that were mentioned at the council meeting, because they're already on site, they understand some of the specific needs of the pickup and drop off patterns, and they are able to connect with their parents much more directly than the city is. Many of their parents aren't even city residents; they're out of district or out of area. So, with all those factors being said, if the school district is willing to cooperate or take the program on, there could be many options, and one could be even a potential 1-year hold on removing any locations, or providing all 24 in that package to them, or some split version where there's some different funding mechanisms. So that those are all, nothing's been predefined in terms of what the goal is or what the outcome is going to be.
So I'm just curious, because you've put a lot of effort into the Walk to School program and a lot of outreach, and I commend staff for doing such a wonderful job with that, especially Alexandra for doing all of the social media and all of that packet. But I'm just wondering, is there in the discussion any other outreach to parents when you get together with CVUSD, since they're the ones that are directly impacted? Is that going to be some part of the discussion? And maybe a model could be something that you're already doing with zoning, where you get different pockets of the city together, parents, to talk about this. And I don't know if that was something that when you were talking about outreach, what that would look like, or if this is something that you would consider.
Oh no, it certainly is, and this is a behavior change thing. The city's helped put on some one-off events, a walk and roll with the mayor events and so forth, and even at those campuses, even on that day, there's a tremendous groundswell of walking to school, and then shortly thereafter,
Right.
2 days afterward, everyone goes back to their normal habits. So it's very difficult to kind of, break those habits, and that this would be an ongoing element, and it would need to be more than just the city doing it. Like as I mentioned,
Yes.
the school district seems to have a better connectivity to their parents and students, and that could help build on that, and definitely make that, hopefully make that a much more positive upswing in terms of the numbers there.
I'd like to
Oh, I'm
actually
sorry.
jump in just to say that the walk and roll events I've participated in, and they're fantastic. Al Adam participated directly along with several city officials. They were well attended. TOPD helped out as well. So I think that the programs themselves, they are getting word out. They are, reaching the right people. It's again behavior and consistency, right? So I just wanted to comment on the walk and roll.
And one final question, I promise. So this is a snapshot, right, of a moment in time. And I'm wondering what happens when the population changes, because we hope that the population will change, that we'll have, younger families with young children come in. What are the parameters to bring crossing guards back, if there are any?
Yeah, I think that would just be related to, as we discussed earlier, it would be on a request basis. That request could be from the school itself. The request could be from a parent, and those items then would therefore be evaluated kind of annually to, consistently with all the rest of them. And that is very conceivable. I mean, we've had a pretty large decline in school enrollment across the CVUSD in Thousand Oaks, maybe over the past 20 years or so. And I'm sure that not only they, but everyone is, hoping that trend reverses itself and doesn't continue, and that would lead to a lot more local neighborhood activity and walking to school.
We would want it to, right? And
Yeah.
I think that that's probably one of the goals for the city, to increase the and to make it friendlier for younger families to be welcomed into the city. And this is certainly a program that would make them feel comfortable with sending their kids to school. So
Yeah, I think a lot of the efforts, whether it's the zoning or the general plan and a lot of the other and the components that Public Works does, our limited lens on the city are all related to kind of helping transform the city toward the future.
thank you so much.
Any additional commissioner questions? Vice Chair Immel?
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Watts, thank you for the report. This was a lot of information to package, and definitely appreciate the way that you presented it. I will also say that this was probably the most comprehensive report that, as a commission, I think we've received on the subject of crossing guards, which, it kind of triggered an ambiguity for me in terms of the resolution, because this was the first time that we saw an intersection, a graphic of the intersection with the counts of the number of cars that go through or turn left or turn right. This was also the first time that we saw separate counts for pedestrians versus what it says, like school pedestrian. And so that caught my attention, because when we were developing the policy, there was never any distinction made between pedestrian and school-age pedestrian. And the resolution, in fact, does not reflect that. What we got in previous meetings was, my eyes are, I gotta go get an eye exam. It's page 6 of the engineers report, or the consulting firm's report, page 6, which when you look at that, and I think at the time that we were talking about the development of this resolution, and this is a little hard to read, but the graphic would just at the top, it would say it would count pedestrians and it would count vehicles. And I can only speak for myself when I say that when I was considering pedestrian counts, I thought that always included parents or whoever it was that was crossing with them, because to not include them, it would seem like a weird disincentive to supporting kids walking to school and that time that parents have with their children when they walk them to school. I happen to be one of those parents. And so I thought that was, a really good way to support, as the policy says, the safe crossing of school-age students at area schools. But nowhere in the resolution does it say we only count school-age children. So you know, that just caught my attention because I think maybe there's room for, I don't want to say argument, but there's room for an observation that, hey, wait a minute, the counts aren't correct, or they're not in alignment with the express language of the resolution. And I suppose I have nobody but to blame myself because I was on the commission at the time that we developed this resolution, and I was just under the belief that we were counting people walking across an intersection. Not that we were making any distinction, because honestly, I don't know what a school pedestrian is. I don't know if that's, you know, some subjective, you know, because the counters, how do they know? I walk across the street with my daughter almost every day to school, and there are whole families walking. They're 1 or 2 children to school, but they're with strollers. They're with kids who don't even go to TK yet. They're very small children. There's moms and dads. And so I always thought that everybody was just getting counted, but it now appears to me that that is not the case, and that there's some subjectivity by a counter in trying to guess at which of the kids crossing the street are actually going to school today. So I guess my question is, when we were looking at this previously, when we were looking at you know, that figure on page 6 of the consultant's report, and it's just counting pedestrians, we were only looking at school-aged pedestrians, or what were perceived to be school-aged pedestrians. Is that?
That is what, I mean, there's a breakdown in there, as you mentioned, but that is the count, basically the student walking to school. That's why the crossing guard is there. That's who they're serving, I guess, is what the clarification is on that one.
Yeah, and I understand that. I thought about that, which is, well, if the parents are walking the children to school, do you really need a crossing guard? But then I thought, well, you know, as a parent, if I know I'm about to embark on a trip to school and I'm walking across a busy intersection, maybe I just decide, you know, if there's no crossing guard there, I don't really want the responsibility falling completely on my shoulders to stop traffic. And maybe we just abandon it altogether. Maybe I just drive. So I think, you know, if what we were looking at, what we've always been looking at was school-aged pedestrians, maybe that needs to be better defined in the resolution, and that's kind of tacking on to what Commissioner Selm was saying about some of the other uncertainties in the resolution. So I just wanted clarification that what we had always been talking about was school-aged pedestrians and not just all pedestrians.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate the clarification.
Sure, go ahead.
Commissioner Selm?
I just want to highlight that. I mean, I think that's a very, very good point, Vice Chair. The qualifying standards in the program standards just says pedestrians. I mean, there's no distinction to be had there. So just to clarify, you're saying in all years prior, you were only counting school-aged pedestrians.
That is correct.
So the counter was identifying the age of the person.
Basically, yeah.
Sight.
Yes.
I-
Which is typically pretty straightforward. There's usually, you know, a student with a backpack, and there's the person without a backpack or without any school supplies or anything.
Okay. I mean, to Vice Chair, I'm new to this, so I haven't seen these counts before, but it sounds like maybe prior, you know, traffic commissioners and maybe city council members weren't provided that information of that distinction. So that's, I mean, that to me just seems a little curious. So, if that is a distinction, I just want to second that should be made in the program guidelines, and that I would urge to staff to maybe even rethink that, as it just says pedestrians. I mean, I would think that as an adult, I would honestly still feel more comfortable crossing a busy street with a crossing guard, regardless of what age I am. So I'm just putting that out there, that if, to me, as I read this, it is pedestrians. it's not just school-age pedestrians, so.
Yeah, and that could be a carryover from basically the state standards, and that's how they're counted across the state. It's, I guess by default, it's for the school-age pedestrians, but that's definitely an area that could be clarified a little better.
Okay, yeah, I just want to clarify that. I did take a look through the state standard, and it does indicate that they're basically for the school-age pedestrians. That's where the program is modeled after.
Thank you for that.
Commissioner Weichel.
Just a quick question. What's next? I mean, you mentioned the school district getting involved. What is that the next step of this process?
Yeah, it's already underway. There's discussions with the school district, and so depending on how that goes, if they're interested or not interested, or if there's some partnership there or some participation from their end, and that might affect things, and this would then go back to city council and with some recommendation or update or extend 1-year term and allow the transition to happen to the school district or some financial components, et cetera. But if that doesn't take off or get off the ground, then we would proceed with notifying the school district further, and planning our efforts around the 25-26 school year on the 14 locations that do meet the policy.
Any additional questions from commissioners? I just have a couple. These were really good questions, and I want to second. Thank you, Mr. Watts, for all of the data, all the information. I know a lot went into this. Following up on Vice Chair Immel's point, just going down that road with pedestrians, if we rerun this, does it move the needle? Does it make a difference if we were to include adults?
Yeah, I can't make that determination now, but probably for a couple locations. Some of them, I glanced at a few of them now, which had 0 adults, so it wouldn't make any difference there. But on some of them, it potentially could.
Right. Okay. I think this has been addressed, but I just want to clarify the actual counts done by the M6, the consulting firm. They're done on standard days, Tuesdays and Thursdays. Between February 25th, April 11th. Looking at the numbers, I'm not seeing averages here. So does that mean that each crosswalk was done on one day?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. And last year, it was also done on one day?
Yeah, that is how they've always been analyzed, and even doing that winds up taking, as you've seen there, almost a month and a half, 2 months. But many locations wind up having to be recounted because the forecast looked clear, but that day wound up not being clear, or something happened, or there was a school event that the school didn't notify us about, the field trip, or late start, or they're doing a jogathon or something, so that it kind of throws all the numbers off, or nobody's on campus. So we had to rerun, I think, 7 locations out of the 24.
Okay.
So it wound up being 31 counts. Yeah.
Okay. And so where we stand right now, moving forward, fast forward, we've got summer, right around the corner. School year starts. I know these discussions are happening right now between the city and the superintendent for CVUSD. Assuming nothing changes, next year we're starting with 10 fewer crossing guards. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
And as Graham had mentioned earlier, the program has added in locations and cut locations, over the past, 40 years, that no changes have been made for maybe 5 or 10 years now. But I think Westlake Hills was added in 2017 or 18. I think that was the last change to the program. But prior to that, there had been more, and I think there used to be even more locations, more than the 24. I think at one point maybe there was in the 30s. So,
right. Any final questions from Commissioner Guerrero? Yep.
Yes, I have one
okay.
more.
Yep.
Sorry.
It's all right. That's why we're here.
I just have a question about why it's done at a certain point in time, because it doesn't give parents or the school district enough time to make changes. It seems like this report always comes at the end of the year, the school year, right? And there's not enough time for a reaction. And I'm just wondering if there's a reason why it's always done towards the end of the school year rather than maybe at the beginning, middle, and I understand that with weather patterns, but I mean, we're pretty sunny here all the time. So I'm just wondering if there would be a much more feasible time so that it gives parents, it gives the school district, it gives parents enough time to react, because not everybody has a car, number one, and not everybody, or they share a car. So I'm just wondering, just from the logistic point of view. And I promise that's my last question.
No, that's fine. The counts have been traditionally done in the spring. Maybe it's brighter days or more sunshine or something, and as opposed to trying to do them in the fall, the Santa Anas, or I'm not sure, but in order to make kind of the counts apples to apples, at some point they started being done in the spring, and we've kind of carried that forward. We did complete them earlier this year, and we're hearing this item tonight a month prior to when we heard it last year, which was at the end of June. So we did make a conscientious effort to do that earlier and bring it and have this item be out in the public while school is still in session, to allow that to, that communication and that interaction. That the students are still in school, the parents are still engaged. So that's I guess that would be my clarification.
Commissioner Selm?
Just one more quick one. Who usually makes the requests for locations? Is it usually the school district?
It's been a mix. I think Graham's heard from different parties.
Yeah, it really is a mix. So oftentimes you'll hear from a parent, and then we'll ask that they coordinate with the school principal, and then that will filter up to the school district. But they don't always completely follow up on that. So there's interest, and then they don't necessarily complete that request. But that's usually where it comes from. It starts with a parent, with a teacher.
Okay. I guess my question is getting at, if folks are aware of the pipeline that it needs to come to Public Works to make that request. I mean, obviously CVUSD's aware of that. So it sounds like the parents are getting that request to the right people to get it to you guys.
Yeah, and on a routine basis, I do communicate with the school principals on how we're doing, what we're doing, so that I can know when or if a school schedule changes or a special event occurs. So we do have some ongoing dialogue with the school principals or the office manager, which seems to be more often the key contact. So we do have some dialogue with them.
Excellent. Thank you.
Any final questions from commissioners? Commissioner Weichel?
I'd just like to say thank you for the extensive report, very detailed.
Mrs. Vasquez, do we have any speakers for this item?
No speakers and no written comments were received.
Okay. So at this point, I'll close this item to public comments and open it up for discussion among the commissioners. I want to clarify again that this report was an information item presenting the 2025 pedestrian and vehicle counts in relation to the approved City Council crossing guard policy and to hear public input, which we have done. As such, no additional action or further recommendations from the Commission are required. So for the commissioners, would we like to discuss this further? Vice Chair Immel?
Thank you, Chair. I just have one comment. In response to your inquiry about whether, the issue I was raising about the ambiguity in the resolution is consequential, you have Caneo Elementary School, which is kind of a wobbler right now, right? They didn't make the counts this year, but they've got one more year to go. But they're in the red zone, but they're still alive. But if you had counted pedestrians in addition to school-age pedestrians in this count, they would not be in the red zone. They would have made it. So it's not an inconsequential clarification of, I'll call it an ambiguity, and I think it has real consequences. So that's that.
Yeah, thank you for that, Vice Chair. Would anyone else like to share their thoughts? Okay. I guess I'll just, you know, as someone who kind of lived through this as well with the Vice Chair, you know, we're 2 years in. I think we all had hoped through all of the messaging, right, that we would see that increase and we would be reporting, hey, all of our cross guards are coming back, but that's not the position we're in. And so, you know, we're looking at 10 fewer crossing guards. And I get that, you know, there needs to be some sort of policy, some metric behind this. And I think the way this is going is a good thing in terms of the school district getting involved and having dialogue with the city and figuring out next steps. So I just would hope that, you know, the traffic commission will be involved in receiving updates once those discussions have progressed. I guess my final question on it is, you know, there's not a lot of time between now and the start of next school year when all of this comes into effect with 10 fewer crossing guards. So would it be fair to have an update on this next meeting?
Yeah, we have an action item. I mean, we have an item on our agenda that's called referrals or follow-up. So I'm sure we could provide an update on that at our next meeting, which is scheduled for next month.
That'd be helpful. Yeah. And if it's still in progress, the next one after that as well. Yeah. Any other comments? Okay. Yes, Vice Chair.
To your point, Chair, yeah, we did live through this, and we put a lot of time, staff put a lot of time, and I really feel like we got it right. At the end of the day, I really feel like we got it right, and we did the best that we could. I can just tell you, and I just want to share, that I talk to the crossing guard at my daughter's school on a weekly basis. They are highly sensitized to this. This isn't just like something that appears in the Acorn every once in a while and people, you know, parents get into a frenzy over it. The crossing guards, and particularly this one, you know, these are like retired, semi-retired people. They're not doing this for the money. They're doing it because they care about the safety of children. And I just have to acknowledge that in this meeting, because I feel like what we did in developing this policy really was of service to the city and the community, and to the crossing guards, because they are very aware of who's on the chopping block and who's not, and who's going to be coming back, and what intersections are of high interest to them. And so I just want to acknowledge the work that they do and our work in preserving as many of them as possible. So not to, you know, go too far in patting everybody on the back, but I think the staff did a great job. That took several meetings, and just very happy with where we ended up.
Thank you for those comments. Anything else, commissioners? Okay. All right, so this report was an information item. As such, no additional action or further recommendations from the commission is required. Thank you, Mr. Watts. So now may we please request Senior Engineer Jim Mashiko to present our second engineer's report, which is another information item.
Okay, yes, thank you, Chair Callahan. This next item is an information item summarizing restriping proposals during the 2026 citywide pavement project. Staff has identified 5 road segments to implement potential traffic calming striping measures to benefit bicyclists after the streets are resurfaced. Tonight, we're asking the commission to provide any input they might have regarding the proposed striping concepts for the 5 segments. Just to give a little background, the city maintains approximately 380 miles of roadway, and for this 2026 pavement project, the city plans to resurface approximately 50 miles of the streets. The affected areas are shown in color on this map. I know it's difficult to see, but the colored portions are much easier to see. The construction phase of this project is anticipated to begin next spring. When the city's biannual resurfacing project occurs, we look to capitalize on an opportunity to restripe road segments at little or no additional cost. The next opportunity for most road segments to be restriped is every 15 years. We've been implementing this restriping strategy for several decades and have avoided the need to grind off paint and have unsightly scar marks. This is the most efficient way to install new striping when pavement resurfacing projects occur. In the next few slides, I'll be showing you some examples of striping changes that have been made to calm traffic and create improved conditions for both pedestrians and cyclists. In this example, we have a segment of Lynn Road south of the 101 freeway, which shows a general strategy of narrowing travel lanes to encourage drivers to drive slower and provide either a buffered bike lane or a wider bike lane depending on available road width. Cyclists preferred buffered bike lanes, and in this segment, there was sufficient width to create the desired separation between cars and bikes. This example shows Avenida de los Arboles, where we converted a 4-lane roadway to a 2-lane roadway with a new center turn lane and bike lanes. This treatment helped reduce collision rates, improved ingress-egress movements from driveways, made it easier for pedestrians to cross the street, and reduced travel speeds. Other streets that received the same traffic calming treatment include Jans Road, Avenida de las Flores, Avenida de las Plantas, and Gainsborough Road. And this example shows enhancements that were made at a marked crosswalk at the intersection of Wildwood Avenue and Sundance Street. This intersection had an existing marked crosswalk, and the project introduced additional crosswalk signs and pavement markings to help advise drivers to better yield to pedestrians. This project also upgraded the standard bike lane to buffered bike lanes. And finally, this example shows enhancements that were made to Wendy Drive, where there's impaired visibility at a number of the cross streets. We implemented wide buffered bike lanes to shift Wendy Drive traffic towards the center of the road, which allows cross-street traffic to inch out just a little bit further to determine if there's a gap in traffic to enter Wendy Drive. Travel lanes were narrowed to 11 feet in width to encourage slower driving speeds. For the 2026 pavement project, the 5 street segments that have been identified as candidates for potential restriping improvements are listed here. They include segments of Herbs Road, Jans Road, Canaan Road, Michael Drive, and Parkview Drive. I'll discuss each segment individually in this presentation. As a side note, the number of streets to be restriped during this pavement cycle is about half of what we restriped in 2024. Since we've been implementing complete streets and traffic calming striping for nearly 30 years, we're starting to run out of streets that can be restriped differently. And in addition, this cycle, there's a heavier number of residential streets being resurfaced rather than arterial streets. Now I'll briefly cover the proposed pavement striping improvements. First, Herbs Road from Avenida de los Arboles to Pedersen Road. We're looking to create a buffer lane between the bike lane and the number 2 travel lane for a distance of approximately 2,000 feet. This can be accomplished by slightly narrowing the 2 travel lanes and the existing bike lane. This segment of Jans Road, we're going to extend the eastbound bike lane an additional 500 feet to the east. The bike lane currently ends at Norwich Avenue, and after restriping it will end at Kirk Avenue. This 2.5 mile segment of Canaan Road from Westlake Boulevard to Pathfinder Avenue will add a new 4-foot wide buffer lane between the bike lane and the number 2 travel lane by slightly narrowing the travel lanes and existing bike lane. This short segment, 600 feet east of Orchard Road on Michael Drive, will add a westbound buffered bike lane, and it will be added to narrow the travel lane and help calm traffic as it enters the residential neighborhood. The image on the left shows the length of road that will be improved, and the image on the right shows a simulated view after the buffered bike lane is striped onto the roadway. And then this last image shows a typical cross-section of the quarter-mile long segment of Parkview Drive, which is proposed to be restriped from its current configuration to add a new 6-foot wide buffered lane by slightly narrowing the travel lanes and the existing bike lane. On-street parking will be prohibited. There is no residential frontage or land uses within this quarter-mile segment. Therefore, the removal of on-street parking should have no impact. So with that, the recommendation is in the staff report. I would like to add that this proposal will be shared with the city's bicycle advisory team at their next meeting to gather their comments. In past years, the bicycle advisory team has been in general support of the proposed changes recommended by staff during these resurfacing projects to add buffered bike lanes, and channel markings to enhance the mobility for cyclists in the community. This concludes the presentation, and I'll be happy to entertain any questions of the commission. Thank you.
Thank you for the report, Mr. Mashiko. Do the commissioners have any questions? Commissioner Selm?
I shouldn't have said yes. I wasn't 100% ready. I do have a few though. So I think road calming makes a lot of sense in a city like ours, and so I really, really appreciate that y'all do this and that you're thinking about using our resources efficiently, thinking about this every year. This is awesome. I mean, we have like wide streets oftentimes with people who are going way too fast, and we have opportunity here for a more walkable, bikeable city than a lot of other cities. So I think this is like, it's just perfect, top notch. I love that y'all are doing this. I think that I read, this is what I wasn't ready to talk about, but I think I read in the staff report that you are doing less this year than you have previously, as far as like number of roads that you're restriping. Am I remembering that correctly?
Yes, that is correct. I did mention during the presentation that this cycle of resurfacing, there's going to be fewer arterial streets. There's going to be more residential streets that are on the
That's right.
on the list to
Okay.
be restriped, and generally those streets we leave alone.
Okay, thanks for that. And how are the bike lane needs for striping and buffering determined? Is it driven by the active transportation plan usually?
Usually the active transportation plan may not indicate whether it's a bike lane or a buffered bike lane. It generally just would indicate whether there's a bike lane or not. What we try to do is provide a minimum of 6-foot wide bike lane wherever possible. The state standard is 5, but we try to go with 6. Some streets we've gone to 7 or 8 feet wide bike lanes. But the determination whether or not to have a buffered bike lane versus a standard bike lane depends on what exists out in the field, curb to curb. We'll start with trying to provide 1 or 2 travel lanes that are 11 feet wide. 12 feet is the standard, so we'll narrow the travel lanes from 12 to 11. And then depending on what's remaining, we'll determine whether or not we can put a buffered bike lane or a wider standard bike lane.
So the roads, so for example, just to wrap my head around this, like the roads that you decided on this year, you're just going road by road every year and saying like, can we reduce to 11? And if we can we add a buffered bike lane regardless of like where it is in the city? Is that fair to say?
Yes, that's correct. So once we get the list from our capital improvements team, we'll pass it around all our engineers. We'll take a look because we'll divvy up the number of streets throughout the city depending on an area. Then each of us will come back and then we'll collaborate in terms of what we feel we can accomplish.
Excellent. Thank you.
Any additional questions? Commissioner Guerrero?
Okay, so this is going to be a real novice question. So when you say, and I tried to look up what, because I need visuals, and I really appreciated the visuals that you gave me, but when you say a buffered bike lane, because there's bike lanes already existing along Herbs, coming down Herbs on both, in both directions to Arbalest. Are you saying drawing additional lines? I know that sounds very elementary, so I'm sorry for that, but I just need to get a visual in my mind.
Okay, yeah. A standard bike lane, what you'll see when you're driving down, I think on Herbs Road, most of it you'll probably just see as just a single
Yes.
white stripe. So that separates the autos from the bikes. But with a buffered bike lane, you're going to see something a little bit more. You'll see at least two parallel lines with usually some type of cross hatching in between. That usually at least 2 feet minimum is what we try to provide for a buffered bike lane. And then I think some of the streets we've gone to as wide as 8 feet wide buffers separating the automobile lane from the bike lane.
So coming down or going up Herbs, you're going to narrow the lane for traffic, for car traffic, correct?
Yes, that's correct. That's the section north of Avenida de los Arboles.
And then also for the lanes that are making a left onto Arbalest from Herbs. Because there's 2 lanes that make a right lane, like make a left. So those are also going to be narrowed?
Well, it'll just be the travel, the northbound and southbound lanes on Herbs Road.
Okay.
Some of the lanes near the intersection may not be affected. What will, depending on what type of movements occur at the intersection, what we may need to do is transition, once you get maybe 100, 150 feet from the intersection, that's when we'll start making the lane adjustments.
Okay.
Start
The only thing that I'm just curious about is because when you have those buffered lanes, when you go past Arbalest, going down to Jan's, the bike lane narrows, it constricts a lot. So I'm just curious how that would, why you've chosen the lanes above Arbalest rather than focusing on widening those lanes that are really narrow. Because because I go down that street all the time, so I see how narrow those bike lanes are. Is it because of traffic in that area, like Commissioner Selm was saying, or I mean, I know that Herbs and Arbalest is a very constricted, is a very, not constricted, but heavily trafficked area. So I'm just wondering.
Yeah, I can help clarify that one. These are all improvements we're making as part of our citywide paving project. So every other year, we do approximately $15 to $20 million of resurfacing, repaving, and restoration of the streets of the 383 miles of streets citywide. So that's what initiates this project, and then the traffic engineering team basically just piggybacks on that project and says, "Oh, these are the streets you're doing because we have to repave those streets to maintain them." It's the city's biggest asset is their streets and roads. So within the realm of that project, what optimizations and improvements can we make to, as a freebie, basically, because we're going to be repaving the road anyway, so you're getting a blank slate. So how can we put these roads back slightly in an enhanced fashion to help bikes and pedestrians? That's the driving factor of why this street. So this portion north of Arbalest on Herbs, that's the part that's more worn and aged and needs to be resurfaced. The one south of Arbalest is still in good shape and is not scheduled to be touched probably for another 4 to 6 years.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Yeah, and we would make that same evaluation when we get to that other portion south of Arbalest. However, in some cases, this is just some additional detail. In some cases, the roadway is just so narrow, there is no optimizations to be done. Potentially, the lanes are already 11 feet, and there's really nowhere else to go. For whatever reason, that roadway, they vary. The city wasn't built out at once. It was kind of built in segments over the course of 50 to 60 years. And so in some areas, we scratch your head sometimes, why is this road so wide? And like La Granada east of Herbs, and then why is Herbs itself narrower than La Granada? So we're trying to work within the cards we're dealt. Thank you.
Commissioner Weichel?
Thank you. Jim, thank you for the report, by the way. Just a question about motorists. This has been a city policy, but I would like the record to state, or you to comment, do you see any kind of additional traffic or problems with motorists with the narrower lanes, or is that not really an issue at all? I mean, it seems like it's been city policy for a while now, but I did want to ask about that.
Yeah, we haven't really noticed any, change in behavior that's sort of on the negative because of the changes to the road width from going from 12 feet down to 11. We do observe that based on our radar surveys, the speeds are dropping just a little bit, maybe 1, 2, maybe 3 miles an hour. So if anything, it's a positive change in terms of their behavior, dropping speed just slightly.
Yeah, and I could maybe punt it over to our Officer Keith Hall here to comment on that as well. Have the narrower lanes on areas such as Arbalez, Lynn Road, and others, have they caused any additional?
Not that I'm aware of.
Very good. Thank you.
Any additional questions? So, just a couple follow-ups. We talked about the previous item, which I'm not going to go back to, but I'm going to allude to it in terms of the crossing guards being reduced. We talked about the flashing beacons, right, for $50K. Out of curiosity, when it comes to funding for the paving program, it's done during budgeting. Is that a multi-year budget that's developed or an annual budget?
Yeah, so the capital budget that the city develops is a 5-year budget, but only the first 2 years are funded. But it's kind of got a 5-year horizon for some planning purposes, so there's kind of a little bit of overlap there. But the paving project is primarily supported on gas tax, and in addition, some city council special contributions that they had to make here and there. So it's gas tax as well as some that SB1, that additional gas tax that was passed about 7 or 8 years ago. That's also providing about $3 or $4 million toward the program. So they all go together. There is a gap. We did a pavement needs analysis for looking out toward the future that shows we should be spending about $11 million a year on paving. We've only been spending about 8 or 9 up till now. And most of that increase is because of inflationary pressures. Is not really that we're behind or anything. It's mostly just to keep our roads where they are. But the existing funding right now only amounts to about 7. So there's like a $4 or $5 million annual structural deficit to take care of the streets and roads. So other cities have other revenue sources, or they have much higher sales taxes or measure X, Y, and Z that exist in LA County, or transportation taxes. None of those exist here locally, but so far we've been able to make it happen with the support of the city council and finance department.
Right. And do those figures include like the road narrowing measures, or is that purely just maintaining the roads' existing conditions?
It's basically maintaining the roads in the, it's kind of I'm going to get into the weeds of the engineering stuff here, but into the upper 70s of the pavement condition index, which is kind of where we are right now, which is basically best in the county.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of these striping enhancements and modifications don't really amount to a significant portion of the cost of the paving project, maybe 1% or something overall, and you got to stripe them anyway, so it's depending on how you want to stripe them. There are other costs that do get incurred. There's a bunch of engineering costs. There's underground utilities and storm drains. If we're paving the street, we go out beforehand or during the project and take care of a few issues that we're aware of, so we don't have to go dig up the street anytime afterward or anytime shortly thereafterwards. So not every dollar goes into the actual pavement itself, but a good percentage of it does, around 80% or so.
And it's hard too, because we don't know, several years ago when we're developing the budgets as well, existing conditions that come up during the year. And no, I understand. This is all really important stuff that impacts safety. So it's all very helpful. Any final questions? Mrs. Vasquez, do we have any speakers for this item?
No individuals have requested to speak, and no written statements have been submitted.
All right. At this point, I will close this item to public comment and open it up for discussion among the commissioners. Is there, I'll restate this. Do we need further discussion on this item? Okay. Again, no vote is required, as we are just receiving the report. Thank you, Mr. Mashiko. All right, I think we can move on to the next section, which is a status report of prior traffic commission recommendations.
Okay, just on this item, this was mentioned in the last meeting that the speed hump petition for Montgomery Road between Jans Road and Briarcliff Road was appealed to the City Council. However, shortly after that meeting, the appellant rescinded that appeal, so that item will no longer be going to City Council.
Vice Chair Emmel?
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Mashiko, was there an understanding as to why the appeal was rescinded? Was there some resolution worked out outside of the appeal, or?
Yes, the city staff did make some signage and striping and other, appropriate improvements on that roadway, which were suitable for the roadway. And I think that combined with that appellant seeing the outcome of the similar case on Hendricks that did get appealed to council and did not get overturned. It did not, the speed humps did not get approved on that street, and that street had much higher volumes than traffic volume than Montgomery did. I think based on those factors, the appellant requested their appeal fee to be refunded, and case closed, I guess, for lack of better words. So.
Okay, thanks for that.
All right, moving forward, the next section is commission referrals. There are none. The next section is work program and commission schedule. So this is the list of upcoming topics, which is the last page in our packet, commissioners. Do we have any questions for staff? Commissioner Sohn?
I have a question regarding maybe an item that I'd like to see on here. Is that appropriate at this time?
Yes.
I saw on a BAT Bicycle Advisory Team meeting agenda that the current ATP would be presented to the TTAC. And I'd like to see that. I see that we're going to talk about the study of the new ATP, but will we get a presentation about the existing one to give us some reference point for the study?
Yeah, we're going to have the consultant that's updating the current ATP give a presentation to the to the Traffic Commission, probably in the September meeting when we get back from the summer break. They are going to provide a little bit of background in terms of all the work that they currently performing and the public feedback process that they've gone through. I don't know if they're really going to touch too much on the current ATP. I think their goal is to provide detail on how they're going to get to the updated ATP. I think they're going to probably cover some of the similar type of criteria that they used, that the original ATP used to determine what projects are should be listed and in terms of how they should be ranked. So they're going to, probably go into the same level of detail in terms of the updated ATP, what numbers they looked at, what traffic volumes, what type of community feedback was used to look at all the projects that are going to be coming up into the updated ATP.
Can I ask a follow-up? What will our role be when we get to that point? Will it be to provide feedback on the ATP, or is it just to hear a report out?
It will be to provide feedback, and also the Traffic Commission will provide another venue for the public to provide additional feedback on
Okay.
what they hear from the consultant.
All right, thank you.
Any additional questions from commissioners on the agenda, future agenda? Commissioner Guerrero?
So are any of these topics going to be presented to City Council prior to being discussed here at the Commission?
Yeah, I'm reviewing this right now. I don't believe so. Not on this list.
Okay, thank you.
Any additional questions from commissioners on future agenda items? Okay. Seeing there are none, move forward to Traffic Commission comments and discussion. Are there any general comments or discussion from the commissioners? Commissioner Vice Chair Emmel? Haven't quite gotten it.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say our new commissioners are doing a fantastic job. That they have acclimated and fit in better than I did when I first joined this commission. So yeah, I'm only going to speak for myself. But yeah, it was a rough go. But welcome aboard, and you guys are doing a fantastic job.
I second that.
I would like to third that.
All right, enough patting ourselves on the back. Moving forward to future meetings. The next meeting is on June 25th, 2025. For the commissioners, is there any input on this item? Okay, seeing there's none. Mrs. Vasquez, is a motion required, or can we proceed to the next section? Okay, keep it going. And with that, we're adjourned, everyone. Thank you. Have a great night.